Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Elliot Pister, and I get to present to you a topic called the power of integration, Dynamics ERP and Dynamics 365. So Dynamics ERP being interchangeable for GP, NAV, and even non-Microsoft ERP systems I'm going to be touching on a little bit during this presentation, and just discussing what can be, what should be, and what is possible with connecting your sales, and we'll call it front-end system, with your back-end accounting system, aka ERP. So just before we get going, a little introduction. My name is Elliot Pister. I'm the Encore Dynamics 365 practice lead. I'm in Vancouver. Most of our team is in the West, but we're also strung out across the country, including here in Winnipeg. We have a pretty mature group. So under our practice, we have a blend of junior and senior people, but mostly on the senior side. And so among our group, we have by my rough count, about 80 plus years of combined experience with Dynamics 365 as a platform, and also extending that, integrating it to other products. So you're in good hands when it comes to coming to us for experience and advice on connecting these two systems. We have done dozens of Dynamics 365 implementations and ERP integrations from very simple to exceedingly complex ones. So that's our group. We have a common problem here that generally grows out of a company that has grown, rather aggressively maybe, or organically. And naturally what happens is you end up with the classic silo approach, where you have one system that, was your accounting system. It might have started as QuickBooks. It might still be QuickBooks. You could have matured into GP and a more full-featured ERP. But it's usually its own island. And then you strap on other products as, the necessity dictates. So you've got something that's managing your sales and your customers. Often that's just that could even be a spreadsheet of recent sales. It could be a combined contact list that you've hobbled together from different contact management programs. So it isn't necessarily even a classic system in the early stages. And then maybe you've got another system to handle your marketing, and that's where you do your email campaigns and sort of your bulk announcements to your customer base. Generally, a purpose-built, standalone system. And then we've got this other thing that we're all very familiar with, which is Outlook. And that's, in a true sense, it's its own system. It's where your daily activity comes out of. And most people spend most of their day in front of Outlook. So, this is only four. There might also be a production system. You might have something that you have built custom on your own, with its own dedicated needs. So it's certainly not uncommon that when Encore comes to the table, we're seeing this kind of silo problem where information is not shared between each system, and essentially you don't trust what you're seeing in any of them because there is no source of truth. So what are the top 5 signs that you maybe have an integration problem? Everybody loves top 5 lists. So here's the 5 that just spring to mind that I think are probably the most common. One of them, like I just alluded to, is you don't trust your data. You don't have a single source of truth. In other words, you might have customers in GP that are similar but not necessarily the same as what you have in your customer management system or in your personal contacts list. You might have some information that's more current here and some that's more current here. So you need to know going in, well, if it's a telephone number I'm looking for, more likely it's current in Outlook. If it's billing address I'm looking for, well, then we're going to go to GP for that. not very scalable, not very transferable across employees or new hires. And essentially, in the end, you start to throw your hands up in the air because you really don't know what is true anymore. Number 2, duplication of effort. So let's say, I also call this time capsuling. So in other words, you sell something to a customer, you send it out, it ships, and now you need to devote separate time in your calendar to going back and updating the different sources of this information. So, hey, what's the last time we sent this customer our widgets? Well, I'm going to have to go into MailChimp and make sure that we update the last contact date there. I'm going to have to go into our standalone CRM and record it there. So basically, all you're doing is recording things you've already done for everybody else's future benefit. It's not, it's not handy to you now, but you need to log this activity across multiple systems. Time capsuling, very common. Number 3, your sales cycle is a one-way street. So you engage a customer, you do the relationship work, you develop a proposal or a quote, you get a commitment from them, and then you promptly drop them into this black hole that is fulfillment and accounting. And the relationship manager or the salesperson has really no visibility to what's going on in that world, and there's no feedback loop when something goes wrong or when a trend develops that might require some follow-up and some relationship hand-holding. So this sales cycle in a well-designed integrated system, it loops back on itself so that the original point of contact for that customer knows what has happened and they can move that relationship forward. Another one is maybe not so obvious, but it's also kind of insidious in that you're missing opportunities all over the place to build your customer relationships, to build your sales. So, your customers leave signals and cues with their buying behaviors. Are you able to respond to those cues? So like I mentioned before, if something goes wrong, if an order hasn't shipped, a customer hasn't paid, there's been no orders in the past X number of months, is that information being pushed to the right person that can remedy the relationship? But on the positive side, a customer is placing many of a similar type of order. Is that information being flagged, and is there possibly a volume buying opportunity that you can offer the customer? Is there some other companion product that you should be suggesting, but you don't because it's, like I said, you have this one-way sales cycle that ends in accounting. So you're really missing opportunities to build your sales and to offer the customer greater value by predicting and understanding their needs. And then number 5, your growth is inhibited by your inability to react faster. So really all the previous 4 talk about the benefit of automating things. When you don't have any automation, when you don't have any integration across business units or across departments of your company, you're doing a lot of manual work. You're having to do a lot of digging and asking questions that aren't made easily available to you. So how quickly can you grow if you needed to? If something happened, you got some great press, you had some excellent sales and marketing breakthrough, would your sales team be able, do they have the bandwidth to respond and react faster to take on that additional demand? Often the answer is no. So here's a bonus reason. Here's a sign you have an integration problem. Your competition doesn't. So there's a very good chance that they have adopted more modern means of integrating their systems and their processes, and so they are able to move faster. they aren't missing the sales opportunities that you are. Their sales cycle is not a one-way street. They're not duplicating their effort. So you're going to get left behind if you don't at least address this problem, spot if you have a problem, and address it. Okay, so before we move on, I just want to set the table a little bit and make sure that everybody in the room and in the meeting here today knows what we're talking about when we say let's integrate Dynamics 365 to your ERP. So what is Dynamics 365? Maybe you're fairly new to it, and typically or historically this was called CRM, Customer Relationship Management. Well, now it's so much more than that. So previously, customer relationship management referred to sales and customer service and a little bit of marketing. But now think of it as everything that is not back office functionality. So anything that is customer facing, anything that is operational, a lot of development has been done on the Dynamics 365 platform recently. And now there is project service automation, there's field service, there is talent management for the recruitment of people and HR type purposes. So Dynamics 365 is really everything that your accounting system isn't. So there's a lot of capability to integrate and really leverage what lives in D365. So what makes sense to integrate? What can be integrated? So all of the Microsoft ERP platforms that you see listed here have a connector to Dynamics. Some are easier than others, less labor intensive, but all have that path to be able to stitch the two systems together fairly seamlessly. And a company like Encore is your partner in doing that. But also it means if you have a non-Dynamics ERP, Sage is one common example we come across. There's a way to connect it. If you've built something that's completely on your own, maybe it's even an Access database for managing your customers, that can be connected. Or maybe you just have you have a black box of an accounting system and all you're able to do is spit out text files that are lists. Even that can be integrated with Dynamics. So there's really no excuse not to at least explore this and decide how can we, like I mentioned before, stitch together our processes and make sure that it's smooth and has that feedback loop. With the advent now of Microsoft Flow, this world has just completely exploded as well. So there are more than 230 applications that can be connected to Dynamics 365. Things that obviously these are not Microsoft products. So this includes the little tools that you use every day, your Google, your Gmail account, your social networks, purpose-built marketing platforms. There's really no end to what can be connected in the right context. Okay, so just briefly, what kinds of information makes sense to connect? What is in common between your accounting system and D365? So obviously, it's things like orders, customers, quotes, your current product inventory, price lists. If you have various price lists that you offer to different levels of customers depending on your relationships. If you have billable staff, maybe that's the timesheets that they enter online. That can be drawn right into accounting for billing or for invoicing. And then other things that aren't necessarily record types, but you see I've got status updates. So if something important happens in accounting, maybe a status needs to be triggered in Dynamics that can let a salesperson know that, hey, a customer has been placed on credit hold because they're not paying their bills. Or maybe activities get kicked out. So something, a product ships, a salesperson possibly gets notified to follow up with them in a week. So even that kind of thing, not necessarily moving data back and forth, but it's setting flags and triggers in Dynamics. It can be really helpful in in surrounding that customer and making them front and center in your interactions. Let's talk about some common integration challenges, just to spark your imagination a little bit. What are some things that, common scenarios that come up in various businesses every day that would be a good argument for integration? So one that I like is, salespeople get asked to send out quotes every day, and typically they are working with dated information when they go to send out their quote. So they are possibly looking at a price list that could be 3 months out of date, and they're trying to base pricing on that. They're wondering, these products that I'm quoting, do we actually have them? Are we, has the price fluctuated over time? Maybe if it's a resource-based product, the pricing is very fluid. That's a great application of real-time inventory availability in Dynamics when you're building your quotes. What's another one? How about, like I mentioned previously, a normally high-volume, good customer is now 90 days late on several invoices. Well, this is something that a salesperson would never know about unless they just happen to fluke into the information, or maybe it came up at a staff meeting that there's a customer that's a credit risk. Wouldn't it be nice to know immediately, since this is a high volume customer and they may be pushing lots of orders through you, you need to know right away that they're a credit risk. Well, this is something that is a great application for customer level integration. Another good one is you've got, sales staff that are commission only, or maybe a big portion of their compensation is commission, and they have sales goals that are based on shipped orders. So they can't wait till the end of the month to know how they're doing. They need to know, as orders are shipped, how they're tracking. So this is something that can be connected to D365 sales goals functionality, where they see a real-time status of how they're doing, how they rank among their peers, if you want a competitive situation, and it gives them real-time visibility to how they're tracking towards their targets. Another simple one: you are a services organization and you have billable resources, and at the end of the week they bill their time, and those need to be invoiced immediately. Well, normally this is a very long, drawn-out process if you have, let's say, dozens of billable resources that are just submitting timesheets either in paper or in a parallel system that isn't connected to your accounting. Wouldn't it be great to just have those things drawn directly in and able to be reviewed and invoiced within a 24-hour period? That's quite possible with Dynamics 365 integration. So I mentioned before that each of the Dynamics products has integration possibilities, but they're all handled a little bit differently. So if you are GP, we use a couple of third-party products that are very mature and established and reliable, two of which are Scribe, Smart Connect, and there's also a couple other middleware apps that basically sit between Dynamics and GP, and they handle that traffic. And in doing that, they can also do some logic to make sure that each system is, the information is being packaged up properly for each system. So I don't want to go into too much of a technical review, but this is just, I guess, the takeaway from this with Dynamics GP is that there is no built-in connection. Instead, we rely on one of these partner products that is a separate license or even a subscription-based service. If you are Dynamics Nav, there's something called the Nav Connector, which is built-in integration to Dynamics. So basically, it's you turn it on and you make a few choices about how you want information to flow, and you set a few rules, and it's a much simpler integration process. Business Central, same thing. All of the above also offer us the ability to do something completely custom using what they call plugins. So it is through the use of plugins that we're also able to connect to other ERPs. So again, without going too technical, just know that there is an integration solution for just about any accounting system that you can dream up. All right, let's just talk about, let's say, yeah, you've identified a few processes that could really benefit from an integrated approach. Actually, before identifying those processes, let's just say you think this is a good idea. We don't know what it means yet, but it's a good idea. So how do you identify the right ones? Well, one of the things that I would suggest is look for repetitive, consistent processes that don't require any kind of judgment call. So, for example, you have customers that sometimes fit. It might be one-time customers versus really good customers, and only some of them do you actually want to set up as an actual account in your accounting system. Well, that's something that is not a 100% of the time model, and so it requires a judgment call. Not really great as an integrated process. So it's got to be something that is, with very rare exception, always done. Since there is a bit of a time investment, therefore, financial investment in integrating systems, choose ones that you think can really prove a measurable benefit to the company. So not just a convenience, but, like that previous example that I gave, which is motivating salespeople. If they know that they are, running behind for the month based on their quota, well, that's measurable. So giving them that information on shipped orders lets them react, lets them sort of ratchet up the intensity for the remainder of the month and close more deals. That's something that can be measured. Another thing to keep in mind is that once you open the door to your accounting system, in some respect, you have to become very vigilant about protecting data integrity. So if you now have customers that are able to be entered in CRM by a non-finance user, then the accuracy of that information now lies on their lap as well. It's not strictly on your accounting team's list of responsibilities. So you need to be careful about who is the master, who is the slave. If I enter ABC company in the CRM and I enter ABC company in GP, which one takes precedent? Are there certain fields that might be accounting only fields? Are there certain fields that aren't quite so precious and can be entered by salespeople? So it's important to kind of think through that and decide which records are entered in which system, and beyond that, which fields take precedent in which system. So the other thing is considering how your people interact and not making unnecessary demands. So, one thing that we've seen that's quite common is the accounting team will say, well, look, before we consider a customer, we need to have done a credit check. We need to have verified their billing and shipping addresses. We need to have 3 accounting department contacts. We need to have. But thinking like a salesperson, they often don't have access to that information, and expecting them to have access might slow them down and might make them less effective. So you need to be really careful about what kinds of information you push onto users that didn't have this responsibility to enter it previously. Okay, so just thinking about creating a natural workflow that also keeps people efficient and effective, and doesn't slow down your business in any way. So cost considerations. So a few things to think about is that often there's a savings that you'll see just in licensing. So you've got I can think of a few recent companies that I've worked with where they have salespeople that are licensed in their ERP system just to create quotes and send out, send out quotes to customers. So they're paying for basically a big ticket license when they could be accomplishing that with a much cheaper team license in Dynamics 365. So they don't need all that accounting functionality, yet they're having to pay for it. So you might actually see savings by moving them out of the ERP, since they don't need access to finance, and moving them into Dynamics 365. So what kind of range of services should you expect from a company like Encore when we come to do this integration work for you? So it is possible that if you say, look, Elliot, we just want to sync our accounts, and we just want completed orders to show up in CRM so that we can see them underneath our customer when our salespeople look them up. Well, that's small, and it could be, if you're in Nav and you're using the Nav connector, it could be a day or two of work. But often there is more complex business rules around it that require a more thoughtful approach, where we've seen 100-hour integrations, in some of these complex scenarios. So just keep in mind that there's a big services range, and so it really will depend on the level of complexity. So, that leads me into having realistic expectations. Some people will say, well, here in Nav, I just turn it on, right? Why can't you just flick the switch? It just, unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. Yes, you can flick the switch, but, our responsibility is to make you aware of the warnings and perils of doing that. Like I mentioned before, we need to be aware that once we open the door to the accounting system, you're inviting a lot of risk in that. You're inviting in junk data. So we need to be, really methodical about how that is limited. Typically, an integration process takes 6 to 8 weeks. On the high side, because there's a lot of testing and verification that is necessary. We will rely on your accounting staff to help us through that process, and often they're very busy people, and so we are limited by how quickly you can move and react and test, and ultimately can be trained up on the solution. Ongoing maintenance is also just one of those things that needs to be tolerated. When you have data traveling between systems, 2 different databases with data that can be in different formats, you're going to have the odd problem that does come up with just poorly formatted information. So ongoing maintenance is an issue. It's not a big one, but it's something to just keep in mind that typically we will promote the idea of having you on some kind of care package where we're making sure that integration is reliable and rock solid for you. Okay, so what I thought I'd do is I just walk you through one of these typical processes just to give you a feel for how it would work, thinking about how the life cycle of a customer request as it passes through the system, and what benefit you stand to gain. So just to keep this really simple, I'm not going to try to jump through Dynamics 365 and GP. I'm going to keep the experience limited to Dynamics 365 and Outlook as well. But let's just play out a scenario where now one of your long-standing customers is requesting a quote for 10 widgets. Okay, so he sent us an email and he says, look, I need a quote for 10 of your Turbo XL 100 widgets. Could you shoot me a quote? Okay, so I brought up his information. This is right from Dynamics 365. I can see, all right, here's the customer. I don't see any special flags. I can see that we know who this contact is, so nothing too alarming here at this stage. And so I've tracked this email, and now I'm ready to build them a quote. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look up the customer in CRM or D365, and I see right off at the top there's a credit hold that's been placed. Okay, so this is alluding to that fact that they've got a bunch of outstanding invoices that are 90 days past. So that right there is information that a salesperson never would have had access to until really it was too late, until he pushed through an order. So now he needs to decide, well, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to trust that they're good for it? They are a long time customer, so yeah, I'm going to proceed, and I'm going to create this quote. However, instead of giving them our preferred pricing, which we used to, I'm going to change the price list here back to our full retail level. So they're no longer getting that favorable pricing. So these price lists and all the products that make up the price list, this is driven by my accounting system. So it's no longer driven by an Excel spreadsheet. It's something that is live in real time. And even though I'm not showing it here, I could also show real-time product availability. So if I try to quote him 10 and we only have 8 in stock, I know this even before I send out the quote and then have to disappoint the customer by going back and breaking the bad news to them. Okay, so I've put together my quote, and maybe I've prepared my printed version to send them off in an email. And now back in Outlook, I've replied to that email, and I can see here I've got the recipient, the account, the contact. I've tracked this email against the quote, and I send them my reply. Here you go, Don. Note that we have a few outstanding invoices. You'll need to get those cleared up as soon as you can. We can no longer offer preferred pricing on these widgets. So we send that out, and receiving a go-ahead from the customer, I convert it into a sales order. And let's just fast forward, and now the order has shipped, and the salesperson now receives an activity automatically generated by GP or NAV, depending, to call and confirm their satisfaction with the recently shipped order. So this is one of those triggers that I mentioned in an earlier slide. Something has happened in the accounting system. The customer relationship person needs to know about it so that they can be proactive, reach out to the customer and say, hey, did you get it? Are you happy? Thanks a lot for your business. This alone is just a very powerful tool, way better than, let's say, an automated email that kicks out of the accounting system that says, dear customer X, here is your, hope you received your order, and something very generic and not really very warm and squishy. So it's much nicer to get this personal interaction. Okay, so I've made this call 7 days later. Yeah, they received it. They're happy. In the meantime, in the background, this customer has also been added to perhaps a marketing list. So because they ordered a certain product, again, through that integration, I've sent out a notification to Dynamics to add them to a marketing list so that they're notified when there's product updates. So anytime something changes with this product line, the XL100 product line, they're going to get an email notification. So now here we've connected sales with accounting, and also we've looped in our marketing people to put them on this list. And then finally, just kind of to close the loop, that salesperson was really concerned about his goal and how am I doing to it. So here's my Q1 goal and my target, and I can see that now it's been updated. So this goal progress is showing me that now I'm well ahead of my goal. So the top of this bar is higher than this little dot, which is showing me where I should be tracking to date, and it looks like I'm doing well. And then lastly, right on my dashboard, I can see that here's where I sit among my colleagues in on our team. So I'm no longer in last place. So it looks like my job might be safe for another day. So anyway, that gives you a bit of a walkthrough of how an integrated process can look that spans a lot of different job titles, a lot of different job functions. And hopefully it gives you a sense for what is possible And at this stage, I would just open up the floor to any questions that we might have.